Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for joining us here at Watch Parties at Christ Community Church. My name is Pastor Brad,
Pastor Joel.
and we are so thrilled to be here, pursuing Jesus with you. If you're in a watch party, if you're doing this, just watching this video on your own, whatever the case may be, we know Jesus has some really amazing stuff for you.
Amen.
And we're really excited about the content this week that we're going to jump into. I preached this past weekend on having the mind of Christ. And Pastor Joel, why don't you kind of kick us off on kind of the direction we're going to jump off of that on a really fun tangent tonight.
Sure. Yeah. I think the mind of Christ is a beautiful topic. And I think that it's one that carries a lot of responsibility because he makes his mind something that we have access to now. In the Old Testament, we didn't have the mind of Christ, we just had the law. And the law was something that was really kind of designed to show you how very busy and how very futile and how very much based in striving life was dependent on until Jesus came. And it was a big arrow pointing to the need for Jesus. And Jesus came and fulfilled the law. So now, with him fulfilling the law, now we actually have him residing within us. And we have the mind of Christ available to us.
So good.
So I just think that that's a really beautiful topic, but it does come with a lot of responsibility because we have to give permission. We have to have invitation for Jesus to enter in and to conform our minds to his. The picture that we use a lot on this topic is the picture of our mind being like a room, and there's furnishings and there's furniture and decorations and everything. And if Jesus is the one who is dwelling there and he's the one that's influencing the way that we think, when you look at that room, does it show him living there, or what kind of things are residing in your mind? We have a choice when it comes to our thought life. And we have a choice, we have permission that we can give. And there's a constant barrage of influences everywhere we go. What are we allowing in? And not just what are we allowing in, but what are we allowing to really live there?
Yeah. And we were thinking this week as we were talking about this content about Luke 11, kind of a parallel passage to sort of what I talked about on Sunday, but really unique because Jesus talks about, really in this passage right before these verses we're going to read together, he casts out a demon, and the Pharisees are like, well, of course you cast out a demon. You're in the partnership with Satan, who's the prince of demons, right? And Jesus talks about a house divided against itself can't stand. And you guys, some of you know that passage, but then he says something really interesting. He said in verse 21 of Luke 11, for when a strong man is fully armed and guards his palace, his possessions are safe. And in this picture, really, this is a negative. The strong man is not a good guy. He's a bad guy. And when he, really resides in a place, he's able to set it up where it protects the things that he's holding on to until Jesus says someone even stronger, of course, speaking of himself, attacks and overpowers him. Some translations say binds the strong man. This translation says it strips him of his weapons, carries off his belongings. In other words, Jesus is giving this picture. I'm strong enough to bind whatever might be holding on to you and take back, redeem whatever the enemy might have, grabbed onto and taken possession of in your life. And then Jesus says this in verse 23, and I know this is your favorite spot, Joel. Anyone who isn't with me opposes me, and anyone who isn't working with me is actually working against me. And I think, we could kind of take that and to help us understand it better, kind of see Jesus saying, if you're not giving me permission in your mind and in your thoughts, you're certainly giving your permission to something or someone else. And it could be a strong man who's no good for you and setting up camp in the room, of your mind, your thoughts, and bringing with him all the things that you really don't want to be there. And it reminded me of a book I read earlier this year called I Declare War by Levi Lesko. He's a pastor over in Montana. And this book, I Declare War, it's all about personal battles that we fight. And one chapter in particular talks about the battlefield in our minds. And he said this really interesting thing. He was referencing a study from the 1980s that found out that the average human individually has about 500 intrusive thoughts every 16 hours. And every 16-hour period, they have about 500 thoughts that they have no idea where they come from or who authored them. And they last up to an average of 14 seconds. That means 116 minutes of your day, almost 2 hours of your day, are thoughts that sneak in, and Levi says they cause untold amounts of terror and damage to your peace. The problem isn't that these thoughts show up, and this is really important because all of us kind of have the imagination, the whatever fear thought that kind of just flashes and we don't know
Sure.
where it came from.
Sure.
That's normal. That's typical for the human experience, I think. The problem isn't just that these thoughts show up, Levi says. The problem is that we let them pull out the sofa bed and spend the night, which is perfect
Yeah.
imagery for what we're
Yeah.
talking about. If you picture a room, we want Jesus to reside in the room that's in our minds and our thoughts. But sometimes we let other things come in and dwell and take up residence. And Levi proposes to us that we install what he calls a TSA checkpoint in our minds to filter our thoughts. In other words, these things are flying around, but we need to be checking these things. We need to be, just the way if you go to fly on a plane, you got to go through security and the TSA is there really searching, really saying, is this a safe thing to bring on the plane? Levi's saying we can do the same thing in our minds,
Yeah.
which is such a cool picture,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. And I think it's really empowering too, because Jesus isn't going to force himself on you. He makes his mind available to you, and he makes
So good.
his power by his spirit available to you. But he gives us so much choice. He really does, and I think that's a wonderful thing. When we look at this image, I think of it almost like a garden. You were just telling me the other day, a garden in your mind, that you can tend this garden and you can allow fruitful, beautiful, blossoming things to grow in. But there's constantly seeds coming from other places that you don't want to allow to grow.
Yeah.
So we have a choice, and we really do have responsibility to tend that garden that's in our mind, that room, to really clear out and not allow things to take residence. There could be lies, ungodly beliefs about ourselves, things that has been said to us that God's not saying, fear, sin, shame. There's plenty of things that we're exposed to on an average day. And, we've all had those days where you've just been through an experience and you just feel like you've been slimed by the world, and we're exposed to things everywhere we go. And but do you allow it to take residence? And really, do you give Jesus permission to take residence? And I think that is an intentional practice. So I really like where this is going, because it's something so actionable and so useful for all of us.
Yeah. I think to take the illustration even further, you wouldn't let like a stray animal just like walk into your living room and just leave it like, oh, there's nothing I can do, right? If you
Right,
don't
yeah.
want that thing, if you know it doesn't
Yeah.
belong there and it's not healthy and it's not
Yeah.
safe, you're going to address it.
Yeah.
And Levi's, proposing and we are proposing
Mhm.
that we need to do the same thing in our minds. And really, we got started on this last week. If you really think about it, last week, Elijah preached. He did such a good job setting us up, talking about shame. And really, the way to counteract shame is through vulnerability and sharing. And so we
Yeah,
talked about
that's
just
great.
kind of cracking that door last week in our watch parties. Well, this week, we want to fling the door open and serve eviction notices to
All right.
the things that are residing in your thoughts and in your minds that don't
Yeah.
belong. We want Jesus to help us come bind
Yeah.
the strong man and throw him out of here, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, we know that can't happen just in an instant moment. I mean, Jesus could do that, and that can happen. But
Sure.
when it comes to our minds and thoughts, we need to really process and be in this process with Jesus. But 2 Corinthians 10 really gives us, I think, a really cool, violent picture of the kind of war we need to wage on the thoughts that try to creep in and take up residence in our minds. Check this out in 2 Corinthians 10, starting in verse 4. We use God's mighty weapons, it says, not worldly weapons, to knock down the strongholds of human reasoning and destroy false arguments. We destroy every proud obstacle that keeps people from knowing God, and we capture their rebellious thoughts and teach them to
There
obey
it is.
Christ. Some translations maybe you're more familiar with say, we take every thought captive in obedience to Christ. In other words, Jesus, is this thought from you? If not, I'm going to tie it up and cast it out, throw it
Yeah.
out. It doesn't belong here. And so really, there's one resounding question I think we're talking about tonight in our minds, in our thought life. Who are you? Who are we? Who am I giving permission to in my mind and in my thought? And so we're going to dive in. We think we've given you plenty to kind of set you up to talk about. I'm really excited about the discussion questions that we have. They're going to pop up on the screen in a minute. But kind of jumping off this question, who are you giving permission to in your thoughts and in your mind? We're going to jump into our discussion for 15 minutes at least. If you need more, just pause it. And we'll be back in just a minute after you have what I think is going to be some really fun discussion. So we'll see you in a minute.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. We hope you had some great discussion, and we hope some really good points got brought up and you were able to share some things about yourself and really learn about each other. Now we want to just take a moment for invitation.
Mhm.
And again, we're using the same imagery where we're talking about this space that we want to clean out.
Mhm.
What we're talking about, though, not just cleaning out and giving permission to Jesus, but also having a new operating system, really a new
Mhm.
filter
Yeah.
that allows the good to come in and is selective and keeps the bad out.
Mhm.
So, Philippians 4 is the perfect model for that. It talks about guarding your hearts and your minds in Jesus Christ.
Mhm.
And what Philippians says is whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just or pure or lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Pretty simple. So that's a good filter for your thoughts.
Yeah.
It's a good place to start. So, what is true? What is honorable? Is the thought just? Is it pure? Is
Mhm.
it lovely? And again, just like in the discussion, a lot of times this is something that is difficult for you to see if you're in the middle of your own situation.
Yeah.
Somebody outside of your situation might be able to help you
Mhm.
to identify what those thoughts are. So use this as a new filter and let's just practice this throughout the week. It's like a muscle, just like anything else. It's a
Yeah.
little awkward at first, but the more you do it, the more comfortable you get and the more
Yeah.
adept you get at the practice.
Yep. So we want to just leave you with an encouragement and a challenge. Take these thoughts captive. Don't just let stuff dwell and
Hmm.
reside in your minds that
Hmm.
you know doesn't belong there. And I love how you just put it, Pastor Joel, that it's okay. In fact, it's really good to ask for help too, because sometimes you just
Yeah.
can't tell the difference on your own.
Hmm.
Is this a lie or is this true? And you can bring it to somebody else who can say,
Sure.
"No way, that doesn't belong in your mind at all." So we're really excited about this and you walking out this challenge
Mhm.
to take these thoughts captive, give permission to Jesus to move into the space and to help you toss out everything else that doesn't belong.
Amen.
And yeah, we want to hear from you as things happen and as God moves powerfully in your life. And we're looking forward to being together this Sunday to worship and hear God speak to us again. And then next week at our watch party. So we're signing off.
All
We'll
right.
see you next week.
See you
Have
next
a great
time.
rest of your time. Watch parties. Hold on. Let's make sure.
Watch parties. Best kind
Ready?
of party.
In 3, 2. It's the most awkward way to say 2.
I can't do that.
1. Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for joining us here at Watch Parties at CCC. This is what? Okay.
All right. I hope you had I lost that.
Okay, ready?
All right.
3, 2.
All right, hey everybody, welcome. That's exactly what I was thinking of. Everybody. Like that.
Mhm.